So ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming the one and only Dr. Ron Paul. It's going to be teaching the right kind of economics and teaching the right foreign policy, and then other people will follow. So this is a challenge. We have a mess, and more of a mess for young people now who are inheriting this mess. And this means, though, that there's no reason to be despondent because there are answers. But for me, the answers are found not in more government, but in the cause of liberty. That's where I about the issue of liberty is it's done miraculous things over a short period of time. Most of us think, oh no, we look back at our past 100 years, we've lost our liberties. You know, there's not as much respect for the Constitution. But if you look at the course of history on the cause of liberty, it's not very old. When you think of an industrial revolution, and if you think of an understanding of individual liberty, it's rather short when you compare it to the history of the universe, into billions of years and even millions of years. But people have only written books and things for maybe 8,000 years, if that long, or shorter. So it's such a short period of time. And the whole issue of liberty has been so narrow and tight, and yet more positive things have occurred, more prosperity, more raising the standard of living in a short period of time than all the rest of history. So we don't want to lose it, we want to build on it, and what we have lost in this last 100 years, we have to reverse and change the course, and in that area, I'm optimistic, and that is why I'm so delighted to talk to the young people who will make the difference. There are so many issues that we can pick up that happen on a daily basis on dissecting out the principles of liberty and then the problems that we face. The problems you hear all the time, and you hear the demagoguing and the politicizing and all the nonsense that people talk about on television, and yet they never seem to know and understand what the basic principles are of liberty. They say, oh yeah, I'm for freedom, and I'm for the Constitution. All the individuals I met in Washington, there's not any of them who believe they really violate the Constitution. They just say have a different interpretation, that's all. And unfortunately, they've been taught these things. The Constitution is flexible, but they all believe they're strict constitutionalists. But the truth is, though, that we must present this case for liberty and understanding and have basic rules. One is that it's based on the principle of individuals, not on groups. You can't say that you have rights because you belong to a group. And because so much harm has been done when you think of people in groups and not as individuals who got their rights in a natural way or in a God-given way. And the problem has been that for many, many years, groups have been punished because they belong to a group. And that is wrong. It has to be stopped. and it's almost always by governments that punish a certain group. But now we live in an age where groups come together and they lobby for benefits, and they call them needs and rights. They have a right to this, a right to a job, a right to free this and free that. At the same time, they never ask the question, where does it come from? You know, who is it really for free? Yeah, they think it is. But we have to have people understand that liberty does not endorse the principle of coercion. You can't take stuff from other people, even if the government does it for you. You know, there's this neat little booklet. I'm sure there's a lot of people in this room that have read it, and that is Bastiat's The Law. It states a basic principle about what the law should do. And it's no more complex than saying that what you're not allowed to do in a civil society, and most laws tell you you're not allowed to steal and hurt people and rob and injure people. And if you're not allowed to go and take something from your neighbor because you need it and want it and believe you deserve it and they have too much, that's still illegal and immoral. But why have we allowed our country and actually the world to get to this point where as long as people still make the argument, I need it, I want it, I'm entitled to it, and I deserve it, I'll send my politicians there to take it from somebody else. That's wrong. And that distorts the whole principle of rights. The one other couple things that you have to think about when you're dealing with liberty is, first, you can't ever use force to have your way. You're allowed to defend yourself. It doesn't mean you give up your defense, but you're not allowed to force people to have your way. In many ways, we do a fairly good job. We don't go and tell people, even if we have strong religious convictions, we have been taught fairly well that we're not supposed to have a theocracy. We're not to use our religion. We don't tell people they have to go to church. We don't tell people which church they have to do. If they happen to get way off on the tangents and they use a religious principle to harm other people and hurt other people and steal, that is wrong. But you can't use force to have your way. You can't use force to have people intellectually accept your way of thinking. In a free society where you recognize liberty, people get to make up their own minds, and there's no coercion. Now, most people agree with that pretty well when it comes to religion and intellectual matters and personal habits. It's better now than it used to be. Do you know there was a time when they thought that everybody should be put in prison for use of marijuana for life? You know, but today they are still putting people in prison, but the American people overwhelmingly now say maybe individuals should make up their own mind about taking a risk and moving forward. Motivators for big government do-gooders, liberals and conservatives, is they believe that you as individuals are incapable of taking care of yourself and can't make up your mind what you can do in risky behavior. And you say, Ron, that's not a good idea. There's a lot of people who are still going to do those dumb things and take risky behavior. Absolutely, they will. But they ought to suffer the consequences, and the government should be there to be the nanny state telling you exactly what you can do. If the government is going to take the role of protecting you from yourself, which our government generally does, when you think about seatbelts and eating habits and all that, if they do that, they're going to try to protect you from ever harming yourself, there's no liberty left because the government's making all the decision. Now, what would happen if this is translated into let the government take care of us? Well, those who say that we have to have the government telling us what to do, because individuals don't know what to do and what is best for them, how can the government be any better if we take those individuals because they're the ones who want to tell everybody what to do and they go to Washington So it doesn't work. It makes things worse. But you know, socially, religious-wise, and in many ways, I think we have made some progress. But not on economics. On economics, for some reason, there's free choices on religions, there's free choices on social habits, there's free choices on what you read and what you look at, basically, and people are recognizing it. But as soon as it comes to economics, oh, lo and behold, political correctness sets in. Oh, well, you can't let them do these dumb things that looks like they're prejudiced and that they're bigots. No, we have to do something about it. So we will use the force. So now we have the federal government writing laws. The government wants to penalize and arrest people because they won't listen to their customers who tell them how to bake a cake. More complicated than that. If you live in a free society, the baker has the right to bake cakes any way he pleases, and the customer has all the ability to walk in or walk out, but not to use the arm of government to penalize somebody because they're not doing it the way they think they should do it. Another thing that's been in the news recently, and I've spent a little bit of time on this on the internet, and that has to do with what's going on in foreign policy. The big issue right now is Obama. Obama's talking to the Iranians. And my position has been not to come down hard on them. I have my qualms about what's happening, but not to say that he doesn't have the right to do this. He does. He's the president. He's supposed to be a diplomat. He's supposed to talk to other countries. But then you come along and you have the Congress saying, oh, well, we don't like this, so anything he does, we're going to review it and we can veto it. Well, they have a point. Congress does have a right to look at what presidents agree to, and that is legitimate. But the whole thing is, the motivation, and they say, well, they have a constitutional right and obligation to do it. But how many people there in Washington are really concerned about the Constitution? I don't think that's their motivation. Their motivation is they can't stand to think that a president might have negotiations where peace may break out, and they have to stop it. So, you know, that we don't vote for war anymore. We've never had a declaration of war since World War II. We've had a lot of wars, a lot of killing, and a lot of suffering, and it's ongoing. And when the wars go badly, we compensate. We just go start another one. Maybe the next one will go better. And we constantly are doing this, but never with a declaration. But if right now, if they can reverse this issue of moving toward a peaceful talk with Iran, in a way, we're using a declaration of war by preventing a discussion for peace. So I would like to think that someday this country, and this is where I am very optimistic, especially with the young people, they're waking up when they see the tragedy of these wars, the cost of these wars, and the endlessness of these wars, and the cost of our veterans. Right now, we're still in an epidemic. 22 veterans are committing suicide per day. And nobody's allowed to analyze what the real problem is, and quite frankly, I think it has a lot to do with fighting insane wars, fighting and dying and killing people, and nobody knows why they're doing it. And so we have to make a sincere effort to wake the American people up, because at one time we did talk about a non-interventionist foreign policy. I thought Jefferson had one of the greatest quotes on this. He said we should have peace, we should have commerce with other nations, and we should have honest friendship with other nations, and we should not have any entangling alliances with any of them. So the immediate thing will be, okay, Ron, you're messing things up. What are you going to do? Just let ISIS go? Well, no, I wouldn't just let them go. I would do something that might help it. No more guns, no more American guns ending up in their hands. More involvement, because all societies and all religions have a tendency for small groups to be more radicalized, and there's been radical fighting over in the Middle East for a long time. So if we stay out of that and not, amplify that and make it much worse, maybe that would go a long way to the inability for ISIS to recruit. And they do claim, and even bin Laden claim, that the best recruitment was our presence over there, in their countries. So I would say yes, we could do a lot, but it would be by doing a lot less. So it's never very difficult for me to say, quite frequently, and I continue to say, that the best foreign policy is to bring our troops home. Saying, what are you going to do about ISIS? That's true. Maybe what you say is true, but now we have ISIS and they kill people and they're vicious and they're violent. And that is true. Well, once again, maybe set a good example. Maybe not being a close ally of a particular country, which is Saudi Arabia, that does about 100 beheadings a year. They're our close allies, and now we're their allies in invading a neighbor country that didn't invade them. In Yemen, so we're very much involved with that war too, and we've been there for a good while. But what about an individuals? What if you feel strongly about it? And I could understand it. Should there be a prohibition about you can't go and support this faction or that faction? No, I would say go if you want, but don't expect that the other people who don't go should come and bail you out. But you should have a right to do it. But does that mean only on one side or both sides? All of a sudden you can think of some fights going around the world that this country may split on it. Oh, I'm sympathetic with this group. Oh, this group's sympathetic for somebody else. That's why non-intervention is the best approach for all of us. It's the best way to protect our liberties as well. In the area of civil liberties is this concept of vices being crimes. There are, in a free society there will be vices, and there will be bigots, and that's pretty ugly. But they're self-destructive. How could anybody really exist if they have these terrible opinions? But a vice, yes. How do you deal with a vice? Well, every one of us has to deal with the temptation to participate in a vice. And then we also have obligations on the way we raise our kids. The family unit is probably one of the strongest units that prohibits and prevents individuals participating in vices. But it's the government that is doing so much encouragement to participate in a system that I consider immoral and illegal and bad for the economics. This economic redistribution has been preached to us so long, we're supposed to be feeling very, very guilty if we don't endorse the idea that we should rob our neighbor to give it to somebody else because he needs it. If it worked, let's say that this welfare redistribution would work. There'd be a little bit of temptation, maybe. But the big thing is, it doesn't work. It makes more poor people. We're reaching the end stages of the welfare state right now, and our middle class is shrinking. And guess what has happened to the welfare? The welfare is going to the rich, not to the poor people. Where are the jobs? The jobs are gone. There's 93 million people out of the workforce right now, and yet our government this past week said the unemployment rate, dropped again, down to 5.4%. Isn't it wonderful that the government's working? Which, I don't know, how many people here believe the government when they tell us anything? The statistics on economics, we can't believe, and then if you want to dissect it out and really look into it and find out who the real culprits are in Ukraine, you'd be surprised that you're not hearing the truth. And what about Iraq? Did we go into Iraq with the American people fully knowledgeable of what the conditions were? No, it was a pack of lies. And look at the suffering. To begin with, since that time, including Afghanistan and the civilian employees, 10,000 Americans have been killed. But nobody ever counts 1 million Iraqis have been killed since we've been over there. They're people too, you know. Many of these problems, whether it's the runaway spending into welfare to subsidize the military-industrial complex and enrich the already wealthy, or whether it's to pay for the welfare system. We've had for many, many decades, especially since the 30s, we have taught our generation after generation that debt isn't necessarily bad, debt can be good, and that borrowing money is not wrong. Government spending, if the people won't spend, of course they're broke because they don't have a job. If they can't spend, then the government has to spend the money. And they've been doing this for decades now, and it's at an impasse. You know, this last recession is going to be one that's going to go down in history because they claim we've been out of recession, but what about those 92 million people not working? You know, there's been a lot of people in recession depression, and but people have been taught that this has to happen. So we have to eventually get to the point of looking at what a free market's all about. Does that mean private property and decide how to use your property one way or the other? Isn't it interesting that property rights protect your religious right because nobody can march into your church or your synagogue, and also into your homes? It's always private property. But as soon as it comes to economics, we have to have all the regulations, and they don't realize that's just political demagoguery and political correctness, because nobody's going to stay in business if they're a bunch of ugly, mean, nasty people. They're in business to make money, so they're not going to chase their customers away. And we ought to become more modern. And even in the old days, when there were laws that prohibited certain groups from going into stores, it was a government function. Slavery was a government function. It was legalized by government. The Jim Crow laws, all pushed by the government. And this is why I am convinced that if people more and more understand what liberty is all about, it allows, freedom of choice and no coercion and more prosperity. I just cannot see how we can lose this fight intellectually, because this is the answer. When the individuals promote the welfare warfare state, you have one group promoting one and one of the others, they compromise and spend on both because they never really cut back. So what do? There's a limit on taxation. They can try to raise taxes, but there's always a limit. That too much taxes will hurt the economy. There's a limit on borrowing. Interest rates will go too high. They have a secret. They have a secret which is utterly amazing. And that is just print the money and everybody's going to be happy. And they've been doing it, and a lot of people are happy that are on Wall Street. A lot of other people aren't so happy. Now, I have a solution for that, because there is this little organization started in 1913 which causes the business cycle. It causes the inflationary booms. It causes the recessions and the depressions. And it causes all the price inflation. And it allows governments to expand, because otherwise the taxpayers couldn't pay for it and we couldn't pay for the war. So I would suggest that little old organization that's been around since 1913 ought to go. That means get rid of the Fed. Destroy themselves, but in the meantime, we want everybody to keep working on it. The first step, of course, is if we could get a good look at the books, the American people would really, rally behind us. And actually, on the audit, we have about 68 70% of the American people say, yeah, why aren't they audited? They can't imagine it not being audited. I still have members of Congress before I left that would say to me, Ron, isn't our dollar still backed by gold? So that's the kind of people who are running our country. There was a young man came to my office. He brought his parents with him after he got interested in the freedom movement. And he was very, very knowledgeable. And the parents were very proud of him, even though they were learning from him. And he was talking about the Federal Reserve. He was talking about Murray Rothbard and a few others. I said, when did you learn all this stuff? How old were you? He said he was 14. I said, well, you know more about the Federal Reserve and money than all the rest of the members of the Congress. But that's so encouraging. And somebody just, since I've been here today, somebody came up and said, this is so exciting, reading and studying Austrian economics. And I can remember that when I discovered Austrian economics. I claim we're all born with a love of freedom, and then we got it beat out of us by the establishment, our school system and the establishment, and we're just taught that it's wrong, that you're evil if you believe in too much freedom. So I think that the people, though, realize how necessary this is to finally look into this and get rid of the Fed, because a lot would happen in a positive sense. So the Fed facilitates, it becomes a taxer, they don't have to raise taxes, and it devalues your money. And quite frankly, I think we're in for a big mess. I don't think we got out of the recession, and this report this past weekend, it was on a Friday, markets were closed, and the job report was really lousy, and gold went up, and the futures market on stocks went down 200 points. And today the stock market goes up again to another new record. And but I wanted to find out why did they do that. Well, there were a couple of Federal Reserve officials came out and gave some reports and said they didn't say, it's okay, everything's good, nothing is as bad, everything will be better next month. No, they said, things are bad, things are horrible, we won't raise interest rates. So as long as the interest rates and the printing money comes, but that'll end. Eventually confidence is lost, and that is what will happen. And that is when the job of the freedom movement has to come about. We have to know what kind of a foreign policy we want. We have to be able to defend it morally and constitutionally and practically, and also economically. We have to know and understand how free markets work. You can't be badgered down and say you're some selfish person because you believe in freedom. And at the same time, the free market is what generates the greatest wealth ever in the middle class. So we have to be able to answer those questions, because there will be a decision made. I believe we are now witnessing the end of an era of big government, especially maybe close to 100 years, where we have had war after war and spending and inflation and destruction of our money, and we have a welfare state that will not be sustained. The only thing that holds it together is the confidence that the dollar can be printed forever and it's always going to have some value. It never worked in history. It's not going to work now. There's a lot more price inflation out there than the government will admit. All you have to do is talk to people who go to grocery stores, and they realize that prices are going up. But there will be a day when there'll be a rush to the exit. They'll leave the dollar, and there'll be chaos. It will be a crisis. There will be a crisis for our liberties. To me, the most important thing is the protection of liberty. Because if we lose everything financially, which is conceivable, we could lose a lot. If we all had our personal liberty and we had our property rights to go out and work for a living and be able to keep the fruits of our labor, I think we'd be back on our feet in no time. But if we don't have a consensus and an understanding by a large number of people, then of course they'll come down much more with an iron fist, and the boots are hitting us, and that would be very bad, and that's what we have to avoid. But our traditions are good. The advancement of liberty there's only been a few times, and like I said earlier, it's very short-lived. But one great advancement was the attempt by our founders to write a constitution recognizing individual liberty. They talked about this foreign policy. They talked about sound money and property and gun rights and all these things. But we drifted so far from that. But this era will end because it's unsustainable, and therefore it's an opportunity. I don't see the sky's falling. I think this is exciting because there are more and more people now looking and joining the freedom movement, and they're having this understanding. It has to be intellectual. Somebody said, "Well, what about this past week, somebody asked me about the revolution. What's the best thing for you to do if you're a Republican? Do you think you can convert those Republicans to understanding what we're talking about? Should they leave the party, join another party? What should they do?" And I said, it's not relevant. What is relevant is what all the people are thinking, because all the people today, Republican, Democrats, and Independent, basically endorse, the wars, the intervention. They scare you and they say, "Look, we gotta go and get those bad guys." Just think of what did we do with the bad guys that killed 100 million in the Soviet system? We made them our allies and fight a war. So I think people should sit back and relax a little bit on that. But this era is ending, and it's available to us now to answer these questions, and that will be soon. It will be soon, and I think in 5 years from now, this will be a different country. And the biggest difference will be what we do about it. Are we going to advance the cause of liberty? And what we need are more people, like Sam Adams said, that are willing to, that become irate, minority of people, and determined to start brush fires of liberty in the minds of men. And we need every single person doing that very thing. There are some personal reasons that I like the cause of liberty. I like it because if it were followed, there'd be less war, there'd be more prosperity, there'd be free markets, and people would be recognized as individuals, not because they just belong to a group. But in a personal way, in a free society, it's up to the individual to determine excellence and virtue. In a society that we have today, with the political correctness and all these things going on, they're going to determine what is excellent and virtuous, and what is good and what is bad, and that vices are crimes, and we have to have strong leaders to tell us what to do. But in a free society, it becomes our responsibility to seek out virtue and seek out excellence. And I think in that type of society, which we had a taste of in this country, it becomes more creative. You don't have creativity in a Soviet type of system or a Nazi system. You barely can survive, and so many don't survive. But the more creative it is, the more nonviolent it is the better. So it bothers me a lot that